Welcome to episode 4 of what was formerly called Higher Learning, which has now since been rebranded to SENSimilla because there is not 50,000 other things with that same name. So we are joined today by David Cunic. He is a physical therapist. He is a business consultant. He is a investing advisor for cannabis companies. If you've been to a cannabis conference in the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, and you've seen the man walking around in a custom-made three-piece suit adorned with weed leaves, that's my friend David. He is here to talk to us today about his entrepreneurial journey, what's taken him to where he is today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about New Jersey too, which is where he's from, which is just past legalization, and are starting to already take steps to move into an adult use marketplace. So with that, David, thank you so much for joining us today on SENSimilla. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having me, Will. Really do appreciate it. And thank you for having me here today.
It's my pleasure. You are one of the first sort of, I don't know how to say this without insulting everybody else, but you were one of the first adults I met at a conference. And I only mean to say you were one of the first guys I met in the cannabis industry that sort of had a professional candor about him, that could talk business outside of growing cannabis, could talk about scaling a business. You had a air of you that just screamed to me, this dude's professional. Not to mention the fact that you were wearing your suit, and I was like, who's this guy? I gotta know him.
Well, let's take it a step further. It's and I get what you're trying to say, but what I always tell people is that sometimes I do interviews like this and you make a comment like that, it's more of I may have been one of the first business professionals with
Definitely.
experience. And that's what it comes down to, is that you have a lot of people who are doing stuff in the black market, but they never did
Yeah.
anything legit and had the really proper business experience. And
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I include myself in that lump of majority. I was definitely, I had a career before cannabis, but I was not, I was a noob. I did not know anything. And that's what I mean to say. In an industry that was so new, when I first met you, you had already seemed like almost a veteran of the industry. You knew all the people, you'd been to all the things, you'd already, brokered a bunch of business deals. You were knee deep. You were sort of someone I think a lot of people like me probably looked up to. I for sure looked up to you. I still do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, but in just terms of uh, you seemed like you had kind of been there already.
Yeah.
You'd been solidified yourself already.
Yeah,
How did you get there?
it wasn't,
How did it happen?
I mean,
Where did you get that suit from, first of all? Let's talk
uh,
about that.
so the suit is, I will not reveal where I bought it online, but as I tell
Blame
everyone,
you.
it's this
I
thing
don't blame
called
you.
Google, and it's this amazing search engine called Google. You can find it really simple. Um,
Google.
Google, yes, brand new concept.
Got it.
And I still say one of the funniest things to this day when people talk about that suit, they're like, "Hey man, don't be a jerk. Just tell me where you got it." I'm like, "Dude, just Google it. Just Google pot leaf suit or cannabis leaf suit, and it's gonna pop up very quickly." Now,
It's
I will
one
say that
place.
I will say this, that I do have a new custom made sports jacket being made. And
Oh,
COVID delayed it being landed over here from Europe, but I had a professional one made with a custom made inside lining and everything. So in 2021, when the conference scene comes up, you'll see a new jacket.
I can't wait. And you know, I- it sounds like we're kind of joking, but the suit is, for me as an observer, and I'm actually going to put this to you, and I don't want to get, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves already with getting into it. I want to know about more where you came from, but the suit is a calling card for you. I mean, I can think in the 20 or so conferences I've been to, maybe I've seen one other person with that suit. It's you know when you come home from a conference with a bag full of 1,000 business cards, right? I'm more apt to remember you because you stood out, and you were original human, not to mention the fact that you're you know, extremely intelligent and know what you're talking about. Is that the case? Is this,
So
like, is
so here comes the
people remember the
scenarios.
suit?
Yeah, so pretty much what it came down to was, and here's the story behind the suit and why the suit came up. So I got involved in cannabis back in 2009, and we were covering online health and wellness for people and for their pets. So back in 2009, 2010, we were producing 100 articles every day on health and wellness, and that includes CBD for dogs, and that include medical marijuana for adults. And that was back in 2009, 2010, when it wasn't that cool to be in cannabis yet. And I've been to every MJ Biz conference ever, even like the very first one, like held in a gym in Colorado, of like less than 500 people showing up. So it was actually, we were at a conference at MJ Biz, the first one they did in Vegas. And I looked around and, we weren't getting enough people to come to our booth. And we weren't, in my opinion, that do something that very memorable. So I said to myself, there has to be something out there. That's a conversation statement. That's a conversation starter. And I found this suit online. I mean, back then, I got the suit back in 2012, and it was tough to find a suit back then. And when I did it, I was a little hesitant to wear it, but I'm 6'3", 250 pounds. I'm built like a linebacker from like Oklahoma. Like, I stand out. And what's interesting is that, Will, when you mentioned some of the other people that have worn the same exact suit I've worn, this sounds horrible to say, but usually like 5'5", 5'6", like 100 nothing pounds. So like they blend in a little bit. Me, like, I'm like a little big canvas of a
Yeah,
canvas leaf. But yeah, it was a conversation starter, and it's been memorable. And the other thing
totally.
is too is that when you go to some of these conferences and you have 5,000, 6,000 people walking around, 10,000 people, and you're trying to meet someone, for me, it's like, hey, look for the guy in the big canvas pot leaf jacket. That's me. You can't miss me. So it was very easy to find me if you had to do a meeting or a conversation. So that's pretty much how it started. And then from there, depending on the event, like you talk about New Jersey, like events in New Jersey and New York, sometimes the jacket was too much. So I just wear the pants.
Yeah.
And I just do
There
that.
you go. You mix and match.
You mix and match, exactly. And now the reason why I got the custom made canvas jacket, which would be debuted later in 2021, is the industry has evolved and it's become more mature. You're having a lot more serious business people involved in this industry. You're having a lot more people who are really looking to, be serious players.
Totally.
And that's kind of why we evolved with the suit. But like still to this day, I wear the pants a lot more than I actually do the jacket. The pants are a huge conversation starter. I actually just went to an in-person socially distant networking event in November, and I wore the pants, and it was a huge hit after the election. For the results. And then to answer your question, how I got involved with Canvas, as I mentioned, we originally started off with online information for people and their pets. But I actually also started a testing lab where we didn't grow cannabis and we didn't sell cannabis. We were kind of like the FDA of cannabis. And I had a testing lab in Denver, Colorado. We were one of the original labs in Las Vegas, as well as we had one in Portland, Oregon. And then from there, I actually started a total of 7 different cannabis companies in 5 different states. And then sat on a few state boards in New Jersey, Nevada, Maine, Rhode Island, and kind of assisted from there. And one of the things, which I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, being a serial entrepreneur, something we do is actually for a while, once a quarter, we were actually going up to the state of Maine and actually teaching a 3-hour seminar on how to start your own company in the cannabis industry and really giving back. The one thing about this industry, which I think is really great, is there's a lot of people that want to help one another and be there for one another and really see each other grow.
Absolutely. Well, as I said to you before we started, kind of in the interview here, one of the reasons I started this, doing this podcast was so that we could demystify this a little bit more, which you've been doing for years, and I think that was again a big part of a big thing I learned when I first met you was about. I don't want to say that the industry isn't sexy. It is. It's fun. It's there's a lot of aggressive growth. Like there's a lot of things going on. But at the end of the day, this is a job, and even more than that, it's an important job because the world looks to us as all these states kind of fall towards legalization, right? Like we're you know a huge responsibility is rests on the shoulders of these entrepreneurs who are taking these, you know, they're big chances. They're still very risky businesses
Well,
despite state legal.
let's take it a step further. And sorry to interrupt you, but this is something I think is really important for everyone to hear on your podcast. Because something you know about me, Will, is that I talk about green nuggets of information. And part of my job as a medical practitioner is to empower people with information and knowledge. So each time someone listens to a podcast, you should be able to get one or two things. It's
Absolutely.
2020. It's almost 2021. I got involved in this industry back in 2009 when it wasn't cool living in New Jersey and getting involved in this industry. Like, heck, I'm working with professional athletes and Olympic athletes as their physical therapist, but I'm also doing cannabis on the side. Like, there was that balancing act. But where I'm going with this is that it's 2021 and the industry is becoming a lot more mature.
100%.
People are taking this industry very seriously, like starting any other company. If you come at this half-assed, or you really don't know exactly what you want to do, you're not going to be serious, you're going to be left in the dust.
Yeah, and I think that's like a lesson that a lot of, you know, quote cannabis entrepreneurs learn very quickly, because there is you know, a certain allure. I say to my clients all the time, and maybe you've heard me say that, like, we're still all pirates, very much. I'm wearing an eye patch and I have a peg leg, and I'm telling you to walk off the plank. But the point is we are all still pioneers in an industry that, for the most part, doesn't exist. You know, on the federal level, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, so there is that huge responsibility to take it seriously, but also to treat it as if it were not only any other business, but that, you know, treat it as though you have the responsibility to push the normalization of this emerging marketplace to
Well,
every
look,
other state and maybe every other
yeah,
country in the world.
let's take it another step further. And this is a fun fact I tell people. Uh, in 2019 and also in 2020, one out of every three people we spoke to that want to open up their own business in this industry actually end up becoming an investor instead.
Why is that?
Because people say, oh, well, I use cannabis, or I really like cannabis, or hey, I'm gonna start a business. Great. What's your business experience? What's your business owner experience? What's your entrepreneur experience with? Just because I like eating pizza doesn't mean I'm gonna go open up a pizza parlor. I like getting my hair cut every 2 weeks, doesn't mean I'm gonna go open up a barber shop. What's your acumen to this? And then when you start to educate people on how much it's gonna cost to enter the market, how much money you're gonna need to raise, all the politics behind it, all the red tape behind it, they go, ooh, this isn't that
Right.
simple to open up a business. Maybe I just rather invest in a business instead and make money from it. And that's what we're really seeing, is that you see a lot of people who say, oh, I really want to do my own thing. Then we start laying out the numbers and the time frame and
The
what's going to
time
take.
frame.
And they say, oh, maybe it'd be better for me just to invest instead. So, but that's a really important thing to hear, because I use the East Coast specifically about this. I talk people from New York City, New Jersey, Philly. We have a lot of people who say, "Oh, I want to do something," and when we really break it down to them, we just educate, we empower with information and knowledge. They go, "Whoa, I only have like 150,000. I didn't know I was gonna need like $2 million." Well, great, go take
Yeah.
the
Or 10
150,000,
years.
yeah, and go put it into something else and let the money work for you.
Right.
And then the other thing is too, is I tell people, are you ready to commit to this full time, or point blank, work your full time job 40 hours a week and go work another 30 to 35 hours a week doing this as well too? And people
Yep.
are like, oh, and I'm very frank. Like, yeah, at one point I was running a publicly traded cannabis company, and our investors didn't want to pay any of the board members' salaries. So here I was working 50 hours a week or so for my own publicly traded company. And then I was being a doctor of physical therapy and a doctor of healthcare management. I was treating patients another 35 hours a week. I was doing 85, 90 hours a week for about a year and a half, 2 years, just to make things go and to make it work. Like, it's just like
Uh,
any other business. How much are you going to sacrifice for it?
That's what I mean about the allure of it is I think people, you know, And maybe I see this a little bit more. I'm not sure. I see this quite a bit, which is, because of the nature of CannaPlanners and the work that we do, we're often called number one, or we're one between 1 and 10 in calls that people make when they're starting to do the early due diligence of
Yep.
of what they need to start their company. And I have similar conversations with them. Like, I want to know what their business plan is, because at least 50% of the people calling us hadn't even thought that through. There is a sexiness of weed, right? Like, and to be fair, to people listening, I came from a career before cannabis, but that's kind of what brought me in. I was, I may have seen some dollar signs that that didn't actually exist, and tried to figure out, how do I fit in with this plant? And I think, to your point, um, to people listening who want to know how to get in, I think it's about adapting what you already do to cannabis, right? Unless you're opening a dispensary or you're you know growing weed, you have to be able to add to the industry in some other way, kind of like what we do.
Oh, I mean, and the other thing is too is, let's take another step further, is why not take your pre-existing business and just add another revenue stream and let that revenue stream be cannabis related clients or
Totally.
businesses.
Yep.
And one thing I used to joke about all the time within the industry is the lack of staffing companies in cannabis.
Totally.
Like about 2 years ago, people always ask me, "Oh, if you could do another business, what would you do?" I'm like, if I had an extra 100 to 200 grand laying around, and I had the time, I would open up a staffing company because there's a huge demand. And 2 years ago, there was less than like 10 or 15 in the country. Now I think we're at 30 or 35 or so, which still isn't that much for the entire country.
Yep.
When you and I spoke about it 2 years ago at one of the NECAN Boston conferences, we talked about website designers in this industry. There really wasn't that many at all. And now
Very
you
true.
start seeing people start to pop up left and right. And full disclosure, I think you're a great referral source, Will, because you're really focused on that CBD and also cannabis sector, and you have enough clients that you know what you can and cannot do.
Totally. And to your earlier point, like, I think that explosion of competition, or I wouldn't say explosion, but the increase of competition with marketers or even designers has been, I think, a pivot to cannabis as opposed to what we did, which is start a cannabis company.
Yep.
Um, but you're absolutely right. Like, everyone's starting to kind of figure it out a little bit. But there is value in that concentrated, and I think about this all the time because I'm this is my first time being a CEO, right? I have no experience doing it. So I listen to podcasts, and I, read what I can, and I try to talk to people smarter than I am who've done this a few times, and kind of glean what I can, and apply it to this, because I wasn't the CEO of a web company that just started to work with cannabis companies. It was important that we do this because we have a mission. We have a goal that we want to do, or that we have in mind with every client that we take on. Um, I want to. We got right into it, man. We just got knee deep into it. That's what I love. That's what I love about these conversations. Is like, I get to talk to people I've known for a while. Well, so far, and we can just get right into it. It's the
Yep.
beauty. Get right into the meat and potatoes. I want to go back a little bit because we skipped right over it, and this part is important. But you work in sports medicine, as kind of mentioned. So I want to know, and that's important too, because you own a sports medicine, like, you own a physical therapy practice, in addition to, you're still splitting your time. So I want to kind of go back to younger David Cunic, and as he's starting to open up his shop, and maybe hear about, like, the experience of working in sports medicine, and then kind of what moved you to cannabis, other than probably your love
So,
of it.
it's a great question. And then, what's the name of your editor?
Tyler.
All right, tell Tyler to pause. I'm gonna get more water real quick.
Okay. Pause. All right. So I was just asking you about kind of your journey into, how did you get into sports medicine? Like, tell us about opening up that practice, and then, where the pivot happened.
Sure. So, I actually in high school, big time basketball player. Freshman year, had a full scholarship to a private high school. I blew out my knee, shattered my leg, and long story short, several reconstructive knee surgeries. I was actually the most popular watched surgery by the New England Journal of Medicine for the lower extremity of 1995. I am a John
Congrats.
Doe. I'm a John Doe. People have done research on my knee for what I had done. But anyway, that's how I knew I wanted to be a physical therapist. From there, being the youngest of four kids with a 13 and a half year difference between me and my oldest sibling, there's a lot of life lessons you learn there. And maybe I was young and naive, but my goal was to open up my own physical therapy clinic before the age of 30. If not, I was getting out of the field altogether. And my goal was to open up my own clinic, do multiple expansions, and to sell everything and to be retired by the time I was 35.
Zero ambition.
Yeah. So, but that's back when I was 16 or so. And, in hindsight, it wasn't so much more of the retiring. It was more really kind of looking at more of the financial freedom. But I started my first clinic at 24 years old. I did 6 expansions in 3.5 years, and I sold all my physical therapy practices in the fall of 2013. I was 32, and I achieved everything I wanted to achieve, pretty much in physical therapy. I worked with major.
What's next?
Yeah. So,
You
but now
you you
from
know you were able to retire essentially at,
well, what's
pretty
interesting is
close.
that I wish I was able to retire. And also, though, that was also good business lessons because the people I sold my practice to, like originally, my publicly traded company was going to take over my physical therapy clinics. Then Hurricane Sandy hit in New Jersey and ruined my business. Um, then with the Affordable Health Care Act, was going to completely change my business model, and I was going to take over a 45% decrease in gross revenue in 2014.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people don't realize the Affordable Health Care Act was really going to affect a lot of medium-sized medical practices. When I say medium-sized, generating like less than 5 million a year or so, it's going to really hurt their insurance reimbursement. So actually, when I sold my clinics, I ended up being in lawsuits for a little over a year because they didn't pay us half the money they owed us. So, but I was presented at getting involved in the cannabis industry back in 2009 or so, 2009, the later part of 2009, and that was doing the online information.
So as you were working on your kind of exit strategy with the clinics, another
I wasn't even working my exit strategies yet, to be honest. We were kicking butt, we were expanding, and my business partner, who was also a mentor of mine, was like, "Hey, we have this great opportunity. Would you like to take a company public?" I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Let's focus on health and wellness." And I met the people we were partnering with, and long story short, they already had an online forum that averaged about 2 million unique visitors a month to it, which is a lot back in 2010.
definitely.
And we were going to do their health and wellness side of it, but part of it is they want us to cover cannabis. From there, I kind of did some more due diligence, and I really looked at our medical code of ethics. And if you're a medical practitioner, there are two really important things in your medical code of ethics. One is you are supposed to empower your patients with information and knowledge on all treatment plans. So even if you're not pro cannabis at all, technically speaking, as a medical practitioner, if that's an option, you have to talk about the options out there for your patients. And the second thing is, in your medical code of ethics, is that if there's a better treatment program, even if it's against the law, you're supposed to fight on your patient's behalf on that.
Hmm.
And I'm really giving you the Cliff Note version, but I tell people go back and read the medical code of ethics, and you'll see those two parts in there. So from there, we're producing information. We weren't selling anything. So from
You
there,
were content creators.
yeah, content, exactly, content creators, and we were producing 100 articles every single day, 7 days a week.
Damn.
And we had different experts in all different industries come in and help out with that. From there, we got through mutual contacts and the power of networking. I'm a big fan of networking. the key to my success has really been the power of networking and having good business ethics and good business morals, which is why people keep wanting to do business with you. Um, from there, I got offered to partner up with a testing lab company. At that time, the largest testing lab company in the world at the time, and we worked out a deal where we would be the official franchisee or licensee for every testing lab in the United States for them, except for California. And then that's how we kind of got involved. At that point, already sold my, then 2013, sold my physical therapy clinics. We're focusing more on the testing lab sector and really developing the testing lab sector. And then this
Now,
other,
when you talk about your involvement with the labs, like, I mean, to what extent is your involvement? Are you a financial, are you an investor in these companies, or are you clocking in and trying to uh
so,
develop the teams and
so
yeah.
two-part answer. The lab in Denver, we were taking over and we had to hire all new staff, update equipment, like pretty much give it a huge, once over.
Yep.
The lab in Vegas, there's only 7 places that got testing labs in the entire state of Nevada. That's a lot. I mean, I'm sorry, that's not a lot. It's only 7 for the entire state, and we were one
Right.
of those 7. So we had to do that from scratch, hire the team, develop the standing operating procedures, pass all the certification. And the funny part was we were in Las Vegas proper. So we had to go through the Alcohol and Gaming Commission. So as I joked around, like if everything went to shit, at least I can go do a blackjack for a living.
Yeah.
But that was really interesting because to go through that area in Las Vegas proper, because the irony was is that if our location was literally 500 yards down the road, we wouldn't have to go through Las Vegas proper at all and through the Alcohol and Gaming Commission.
Right.
So that was from scratch. Oregon, everything was from scratch as well too. So it was really developing the teams, SOPs, and literally developing a whole business altogether.
And each
Um,
state, every, especially with a testing facility, like, and this is true for most businesses that touch the plant, there's specific sets of rules. So your standard operating procedures for each location, it was different.
I'll take
It
it a
was
step further. I mean, back in the day, Denver or the state of Colorado only required like 4 tests. Las Vegas or Nevada required 10 tests. That's a big difference.
big difference.
Huge difference. I mean, we also went through the rigmarole where we had a very messy split with the testing lab company we're partners with because they were supposed to give us some of the SOPs, and the state of Nevada came up with tests that the parent company hadn't even developed yet.
Mm.
So now you're making a business decision saying, why am I going to pay someone a $15 royalty on a test that I have to come up with and my team has to come up with? And why are we going to hand over the intellectual property to the parent company and still pay a $15 royalty for each
Right.
time we do that test? That makes no business sense whatsoever.
You just brought up a point that made me think. We were talking earlier about kind of like the business ethics and even the responsibility that falls on the shoulders of cannabis entrepreneurs. Uh, so you got this one state that requires 10 tests and this other state that requires 4 tests. And I would kind of run into, obviously not the same, but there, we run into things where it's, we have to follow whatever packaging creation.
Yep.
It's a perfect example for what we do. It might be different in Vermont than it is in California or whatever.
Mhm.
But one of the things that we've kind of take upon ourselves is almost trying to supersede the responsibility that the states are trying to impose on us. And what I mean is like, okay, so this one state requires 10 tests. How come we don't have 12 tests? And why aren't we trying to roll those out and take, you know what I mean? Like, was that, what do you think about that? Just in terms of like,
So,
that responsibility and trying to set that bar of transparency.
well, and that's where it's interesting. So I tell people in cannabis that are getting involved in cannabis, Colorado's a guinea pig state. And I'm very happy with what Colorado has done, but don't ever compare Colorado to anywhere else in the US. California, as we all joke around the industry, is like a true democracy of cannabis. So whatever happens in California, don't apply it to the rest of the country. Take out Colorado, take out California, and you kind of go from there. And here's a great example. The state of Nevada, we were ready to open the lab, but the state of Nevada didn't have their act together quick enough. on what was required. So all of us testing labs came together and started the Nevada Cannabis Testing Lab Association. So we worked with the states for the rules and
Exactly what I'm
regulations.
talking about. Yeah, that's
But in
amazing.
Colorado, and this is the part people don't like talking about, and it's just like any other industry. Colorado, the big time growers were fighting Congress and the lobbyists really hard. They didn't want any more testing. They didn't want to pay additional money for testing. I mean, in Colorado, for it was you test it for every strain you grew. That's it, unlimited pounds. In Nevada, it was we test 15 grams, 15 to 20 grams for every 10 pounds you grow per strain. That's a big difference in testing.
Big difference.
And in Colorado, I mean, in the early days, like 5, 6 years ago, if someone didn't pass, the growers would come in and say, "Listen, if you don't pass us, we're never going to use you again." Or they'll say, "Hey, great, can you go in and we fail? Could you please, if we give you some cash, could you please go and change those results because we can't lose this entire crop?" And what's interesting is that when you look at the larger growers, uh, and you look at what they put in their performas for testing in the years to come, the numbers just don't make sense. Where they're pushing hard, they don't want a lot of testing done because that cuts into their profit margins dramatically.
Yeah, I remember this kind of maybe it was 2 years ago at this point, a couple of years back when this, this all kind of broke in the
Yeah.
mainstream media, the cannabis media. Um, yeah, I mean, you see that stuff with every industry, right? There's bound to be the people who come in and exert their power and want to retain control. But I think, I think it's in all of our best interests for those entrepreneurs, those business leaders who don't put profits first. I know that sounds so silly,
It is, but
but it
unfortunately, cannabis is going mainstream, and whether you like it or not, in cannabis, you're gonna have like the Budweisers and the Coors Light, the WalMarts, of the industry, and then you're gonna have like the microbreweries. You're gonna have, a great example is this. There's a CBD company that we helped out with. I won't say what their name is because you know who they are, Will. And when we talked with them, we gave them opportunities to literally make about 7 figures a year for their CBD company. But they were honest. They're like, listen, if we make $500,000 a year, we're happy. That's it. We want to be small mom and pop. We want this company to be around for the next 15 to 20 years. And we're very happy if we make 500 grand a year and that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. And but they had that plan ahead of time. Versus other people who are like, listen, I'm going to do everything I want to do because I want to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible in this industry before things level out. And you're seeing that side of the sector as well too. And when you go to the bigger places like Philly, New Jersey, New York City, you're gonna have a lot more red tape. You're gonna have a lot more politics. You're gonna have a lot more lobbyists involved as well too. I mean, I use the state of Maine as a great example, where the state of Maine is pretty much 5 times the surface area of New Jersey, but literally about a fifth of the population. And even when they passed legalization in 2016, it took them literally 3.5 years before they allowed their first adult use sale because the
couple
people
weeks ago.
fought hard against the state government, saying, "Okay, great, let's have the rules and regulations that benefit everyone."
Yeah, unfortunately, we're already starting to see a little bit of that in Vermont. So as that all happens and unfurls here, you know, we'll see what happens with it. Talk to us about Jersey. They just passed adult use this past November. This past election, it was one of 5 additional states that passed um,
Sure.
meaningful cannabis reform laws.
Yep.
What's happening in the Garden State?
So a few things. One, in general, we went 5 for 5 this election. All 5 states passed that were on the ballot, which in the cannabis industry caught all of us off guard. We didn't think we were gonna go 5 for 5.
It was
Right?
big.
It was huge.
It's really big.
Now, there's a two-part answer for New Jersey, and this is a green nugget of information for everyone. If you look at New Jersey, the cost to enter the markets and the time frame it will take to make your money back, you'll make more money investing your money in other states right now. Just plain and simple. Okay. Second part about New Jersey is New
Is that?
Jersey would be
Oh,
like,
hold on. Is that because of just the timelines, or what? Why?
okay, so if we look at in general any timeline for any state that passes rec, it's usually
Years.
about 2 years and change until they really start hammering things out.
Right.
If they've already had a medical program for several years, you already have people who've already lobbied millions of hundreds of thousands of dollars, some are millions. You already have people who've already lined up, like the larger multiple state operators, and they already have a stronghold for the first licenses that are coming out. Okay. Also, too, because of the density of New Jersey and just the economy in New Jersey and the cost center of the market, it's significantly higher than other states.
Yeah.
So, in general, we tell people time value of money. What are you gonna make more money with? What's gonna be a better time return of value for your money? Investing in New Jersey right now, and maybe you'll make your money back in 3 or 4 years, or investing in another state. Let your money work for you. Look underneath the hood of the car. Really look at the engine. So now when you do something in New Jersey, you're better educated and you're better planned. Now let's take the next part in New Jersey. People are like, oh my God, I gotta get in this next round of licenses. I gotta get into it. No, you don't. If you look at the pattern at other states that pass legalization, it usually takes about 2 years or so. The first round of licenses, people overpay for them. And a lot of times, to be very frank, they spend too much money and then they need investors towards the end. So you can
Right.
usually get in the later round. And also, too, like look at California, look at Colorado, look at Michigan, look at Massachusetts. As the additional rounds of license go out, it's easier and easier to get.
Definitely.
It doesn't cost as much. I'm not saying the market is becoming saturated, but it's not like a huge price. And I like to use the analogy of penicillin. Back in like 2015, 16, I was quoted on MSN, NBC, USA Today, saying how marijuana is modern day penicillin. And if we look at the New Jersey market, the New Jersey market has less than 15 dispensaries, less than 15 grows. Those people spent a lot of money to get those licenses and to be up and operational. That's like saying there's only 15 hospitals in the entire state of New Jersey that offer penicillin.
Right.
Now, you think those 15 hospitals or those 15 locations are gonna allow new people to come in and start selling penicillin right away? No. They didn't spend millions of dollars. They didn't have to go through all that hardship. So the current operators are gonna make it as difficult as possible for the new people to come in, which means more time, which means more money. So, I mean, the other thing is too, look at the amount of licenses that are for sale in other states right now. People that just ran out of capital because they didn't plan ahead. I mean, I use as a great example, my test lab in Las Vegas, we went over budget by 400%. That's a huge number.
Big time.
It cost us a literally significant 7 figures more than expected.
It's the people from Vermont listening to this podcast are going to be reassured knowing that the the contentious points of the existing medical grows getting in first is not unique to Vermont.
Nope.
It happens everywhere. It happens everywhere. Well, so what kind of what are the early what's the early buzz like? What do you see right now? What are most people who are calling you interested in? Well, let's talk about UCS a little bit. So after eventually working up your franchise of clinics before the age of 32, you were able to pivot into cannabis, and eventually you started doing all this networking. And I want to talk about networking too as part of the entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur's journey. But where did UCS come from?
So, so UCS is born out of need and desire. Okay. And UCS stands for two things. In the cannabis industry, it means use cannabis safely. In the business industry, it's called use common sense. And so pretty much what happened is this: UCS Advisors was born out of need and necessity. When I raised money for my public company, I raised about $14 million, and it took me 63 private investors. That's a lot of people.
A lot of conversations.
Yes. And when you're the CEO of a publicly traded company, you're no longer really in charge of your company. Every major
Right.
decision, you have to do a board vote. Long story short, I was asked to step down as chairman of my board of directors for a year. After that year, I inherited a couple new board members, which I did not want, and the board would not give me back being the chairman. With that being said,
This is like, well, hold on. I don't want to gloss over this because
yeah,
this is like the entrepreneur's nightmare, right? This is what Walter Isaacson's book about Steve Jobs is all about, right? Like this is a, a business person's nightmare, wherein they work hard, they create a company, they go through rounds of fundraising, uh, probably giving too much control away, you almost always giving too much control away, and then being essentially fired from one's own company. It's insane. It's something I wake up, you know, in in the middle of the night with a
look at
cold
this way.
sweat.
Well,
Like, yeah,
look at this way. It depends if you're in the private sector or the public sector. And I'll go back to UCS Advisors in a second, but people always say, there are private companies. Oh, I want the right investor. I want the right partner. And I go, okay, are you going to give up voting control? Are you going to give them voting rights? Are you going to give them a board seat? They're like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, listen, if you're a private company, you can still maintain control of your company very easily. Heck, you can give people like 49% equity. I've seen people give up even 60, 70% equity of their company, but they have the voting control of their company. They have 51% majority votes. So there's ways to always get around that. But in a public company, it's much different. And the public company, pretty much me losing being chairman, people ask if there's one thing you could redo. That's the one thing I could redo. I would not have agreed to step down as chairman for a year, knowing that I was going to get backdoored. But with that being said, I inherited some new board members, which I didn't really care for. They really wanted to bring on an investor or two, which, in my opinion, was going to take too much of the company, have his claws into the company too deep, and really screw us over and our shareholders over. And I got outvoted. And it got to the point where um, 4 out of my last 5 major board votes, I lost. And 3 or 4 months later, the board of directors come back to me and say, "Oh, Dr. David, we screwed up. Sorry. You were right. Can you fix the problem?" And it's like, okay, I'm now becoming like a scapegoat. So literally, long story short, 55 out of my 63 private investors all said to me, "David, you're getting screwed over. Dr. David, if you go out on your own, we'll follow you in a heartbeat. Don't you worry. You've been great to us." And yeah, remember, at that point, I already started about 9 companies, 10 companies, had investors. I made people money. So people like, hey, we know where you're going with things. Like we know your track record. Unfortunately, my board and so my board members I inherited, we just didn't see eye to eye on things. So with that being said, the unofficial stat by Cannabis Business Times was that an estimated 65% of all business owners in cannabis or CBD are first time business owners. That's a scary number. That's a very, very high number. Most people do not know how to do a pitch deck. Most people don't know how to talk to investors. Most people don't even know how to even ask for capital the right way. And so, out of need, that's kind of one of the reasons why UCS Advisors came about. The second reason was that if you are an average middle class American here in America, you get screwed by the system for investing. Because unless you have over $250,000, most broker and dealers don't want to talk to you and they don't want to show you any deals. If you go to your financial advisor, your financial planner, they can't tell you legally anything in the cannabis sector to do because they're not allowed to yet. Now, if you want to invest in the private sector in cannabis, hemp, or CBD, where do you go to? And there's that missing niche. So we had a very good track record at finding companies, vetting companies, and getting investors involved with these cannabis companies and CBD companies, whether they're publicly traded or if they're privately held. And in August of 2017, we started UCS Advisors out of need and demand, where, as we tell people, if it takes you more than 6 months to raise the money you need for your company, 99% of the time you're doing something wrong.
right.
So we help out people there, and also kind of like young entrepreneurs like you, first time business owners, they need more than just a business coach because a lot of business coaches are like in a box. They do everything, and there's nothing wrong with that. This is cannabis, this is CBD, this is hemp, this is a new industry.
It's
And
different.
here at UCS Advisors, we work a lot with business coaches because we tell business coaches all the time, oh, what if you got your client an extra $50,000 or 100 grand? How much more could they do for their business? Oh my God, they could do so much. Well, great. Why don't you help them get the money? Well, we don't know how. I tell people, if you're a business coach, one of the biggest things you have to work on is finances and lines of capital and lines of credit and how to get investors. So we work a lot with business coaches as well too. Then the flip side, as one of my favorite clients said down in Atlanta, I have this couple, amazing group of people, and they invested in a deal that we recommended back in 2019. And they literally said, Dr. David, we saw you speak at NECAN Boston. We have spent close to $13,000 attending conferences around the country to learn as much as we can about the cannabis industry. We learned more from your 90-minute lecture than we did in attending 7 other conferences. So pretty much that's where we kind of show people. Now, circling that back to New Jersey and New York City, there's a lot of money in New York City, a lot of money in New Jersey. And until a little company called Bank of America, don't know if you ever heard of them, started to talk about how many billions of dollars the cannabis industry is going to be. Oh, all of a sudden people want to start talking to you now. When you see some of these larger hedge funds and you see Bloomberg News, small little company Bloomberg, don't know if you ever heard
Mm.
of them at all or not, start saying, great, this is what you can do in the cannabis sector or in the CBD sector, all of a sudden that money started to come in. And people are going to their financial advisors saying, great, I have an extra 100 grand. What do I do? Oh, I don't know. Well, this is where we fill that void. So we're a two-tier company. We work on helping out startups or companies making less than 5 million or so to get the money to get to the next phase. And we also work with accredited investors, both domestically and internationally. We find them deals to get involved in. Last year in 2019, we reviewed over 325 different companies that had pitch decks, and only 12 of them passed our vetting process. This year, we've reviewed over 450 pitch decks so far from different companies, and only 16 have actually passed our vetting process.
So let's talk about that. Like, you know, what do you see as good investments? What's setting these companies that um, intrigue you or pass the vetting process? You know, what sets them apart from the other
Great question.
440 other companies?
Great question. And several things. One is, as we tell people, failure to plan is planning to fail. If you're going to take someone's money, how are you paying them back? What's your exit strategy? If I'm the investor, Will, and I give you money, how are you paying me back? What's the goal? And don't always say, oh, we're going to get acquired. Yay. Because let's call a spade a spade. Less than 10% of companies get acquired. So there's a good chance you're not going to get acquired.
Right.
So what's your backup plan? You know, so that's right off the bat, you need to have the proper exit strategy for your investors. Okay. The second thing is management team. All right. If you've never owned a business before, you never grown a business before, you never taken investors before, well, you're asking someone to take a lot of like that's like giving a high school senior money. Hey, you've never been to college before, you don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to give you $250,000 for 4 years of college, and hopefully you'll do something with it and pay me back in time. Like, no, people don't do that. And the other thing is too, people lost a lot of money in cannabis. Heck, I'm one of them. I lost millions of dollars. Like I'll be the first one to admit to it. I put a lot of money into my own cannabis company early on in the test labs, and I lost it all because I was just too early to the game. So people want to make sure you know what you're doing. Like here's a great example. There's a cannabis hedge fund. I won't say which one, and they only invest in companies that have a minimum of 5 to 7 employees because they know the toughest time is to go from 5 to 7 employees to like 20 to 30 employees.
Right.
And that's where you really need a lot of help and a lot of guidance. And that's
Definitely.
all I look for. So in general, have an exit plan for your investors, okay? Work backwards. What's the goal? Do you want to have this company for 20, 30 years? You're looking to expand it. You're looking to hopefully be acquired. What's the goal with it, okay? The other thing is too, is that, have multiple options on how you're going to pay back those investors. And lastly, what's your support system? What's your management team? Who do you have for experience? Like, here's a great example. We have a CBD company, and the guy's not even 30 years old yet, but he set up his company to get acquired. And each time he went to an investor, he was very frank. He's like, listen, the minute I get offered $7 million or more for the company, I'm out. I'm selling it. And he was very frank about everyone. And each time he met with an investor, he goes, I come from the liquor and spirits background. And I know how to do social media marketing. And all he does is social media marketing for a CBD company. People say, well, how is he able to raise over $500,000 and I can't? I go, because he has a clear exit plan for his investors. He also told his investors, hey, after 2 years of operations, once we hit a certain amount of goals, I'll start paying you a dividend. And three, he's taking his experience in another industry and applying it to this industry. Another
Yeah.
great example is
Uh,
we're working with a few grow operations. And these guys have no grow experience whatsoever, but they've know how to raise money. They know how to get companies onto the NASDAQ. They know how to go and acquire and do mergers and acquisitions. And they have that experience. And they're going out and they're raising several $1 million like this because the experience versus someone who says, yeah, I'm going to apply for a license. I'm still looking for a building. Yeah, here are the margins. Well, great. 2 locations, 3, 4, 5. What's your goal in 5 years? What's your goal in 7 years? What's your goal in 10 years? And they get, oh, I don't know. I can't think that far ahead. Well, that's bullshit. And it's just, unfortunately, this is not 2010 anymore. This is 2020. There's plenty of research out there to look at other cannabis companies. There's enough publicly traded cannabis companies to look at their financials online. So, that's where people are starting to be more educated. And here in New Jersey, people, as much as they want to do something in New Jersey, if they take their blinders off, they'll realize they can do a lot more in other states.
Totally. And you're just again talking about this team trying to start a grow op. They've never done that before, but they have experience with fundraising and starting businesses and that whole thing. And I think that's in a lot of ways equally as important as the people who are growers, who are trying to, it's maybe like splitting the difference a little bit, and in terms of how to kind of attack growing a business. You can either go all in and sell the sizzle, or you can, get the cow and eventually sell the steak.
Well, it's also being realistic too, where if this is going to be your part-time gig, let people know that for a little bit. Like, hey, you know what? We're starting off slow, and we're starting off slow, and my goal is to do this full time the next year. Okay, fine. Like, this is where it's also know your audience. One of the biggest things we joke around about is if you need less than $1.5 million, you can raise that money on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's not tough if you do it the right way. And the other thing we tell people too, they don't realize, is that it's an estimated 10%. However much money you need, be prepared to spend about 10% of it on cost. So if you need $1.5 million, be prepared to spend about 150 grand to get that money.
Right.
And that's what really shocks people.
Yeah, it's the combination of the the investment or the time investment. Like you either have an idea that's scalable right now, or you have an idea that's going to you have the ability to invest your own time with, and like you said, maybe do part-time or start off slow, and build it off organically. And full disclosure for people listening, and probably most of them already know this, but that's how we started. I was taking I was taking CannaPlanners calls on my lunch breaks, or in the stairwell, in secret during my 9 to 5 job, and that's how a lot of people start. But I think that you have to understand either the time commitment or the cost of doing business and getting it immediately. But once you get that money, it's about what you do with it. You still have to go through you still have to make the thing. You still have to do the job. at the end of it.
Well, the other thing is too is you want to get your company investor ready. Like the
Talk
one,
about that. Tell
so
me about that.
investor ready means okay.
I
You
feel like I'm just
have
getting a free consultation from Dr. David right now, but this is important stuff.
It is, and you know what? You said the word free, and I'm gonna comment on that real quick. There's something we say if you go to business coaches and business advisors all around the country, they all say the same exact thing. Free only gets you so far.
Totally.
Okay. Like
Yes.
that piece of legal advice is only gonna get you so far to gotta pay the lawyer. That
Totally.
accountant's only give you so much advice still. And the one thing about cannabis
You're talking
is
to a guy who charges hourly. Like I
yeah,
completely get it.
yeah. So
It's the exchange of energy. It's super important. If you have a goal, if you have something you're trying to do, unless you can do it, you're better off paying somebody else for that experience or to do it for you, because you're going to spend way more in the long run.
Exactly. And to get your business investor ready, it's one clear plan. Now you don't need a big business plan, to be very frank. Depending on how much money you're raising, you don't need a business plan at all. And people are in
Right.
shock when they hear that. It's like, no, you need a one-page executive summary talking about what's your goal, what's the opportunity, why is it needed, and what's the potential return on investment for the investor. Secondly, you need a PowerPoint presentation. That can be as simple as like 7 to 20 pages long. Just what's your name? What's your company? What's the goal for the company? Why is it needed? How much money you're raising? How you're going to pay back the investor? And that's it. If you do that the right way, you can go out and raise money. Then you can go out to your friends and family. Like there's something called your spheres of influence. And if you actually, each of us have about 16 different spheres of influence. And if you
Hmm.
go through your 16 spheres of influence, you're going to come up with at least 32 to a minimum 48 people you can send this information to. And most people mess up and say, "Oh, hey, do you want to invest in this?" No, you don't tell them, "Don't invest in this." You got to do it the right way. Hey, I respect your opinion. This is a project I'm working on. Would you mind looking at this? And I love your feedback. 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. And the reason once they look at it, they'll ask you questions about it. And one, then you can kind of answering, you get a conversation with people, but also two, they might say, "Hey, I might want to invest in this. Hey, this is a good deal."
Hmm.
Like a great example is there's someone out in Washington State we worked with. They're doing a small cannabis grow, and they need 450,000, and they didn't want to go ask their friends and family. I'm like, why not? It's the easiest money you can get. We went through the process, and we actually put it in there where minimum investment was $20,000. Next thing you know, within about 60 days, we redid what they needed to do, and we raised them about $380,000 in 60 days, all through friends and family, because we put together a proper package. And they realized, wait, we didn't need to go to these larger investors and take up all the equity and this and that. So
Yeah, I think, and this is something I've found myself getting sometimes caught up in is ambition, and thinking that I need $5 million or whatever, when in fact, like, you don't. You don't, and it's irresponsible, actually, if you try to go get it, because you have to pay that back, and with interest, and if it's just sitting there, or if it's not being used responsibly, or
yep.
whatever. That's why there's multiple you know investment rounds.
Oh, exactly. Exactly.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I'm
I got as
interested in
much time
20.
as you want, buddy. You're
I'm
all
interested.
mine.
I'm interested in 2021. I've been lucky enough to be a spectator of you for a few years now. I've seen you grow a few businesses, in addition to your own. Um, we've talked a little bit about New Jersey and other states that have gone or are going legal. What are you looking for in 2021? What's your goal for this year?
The goal for UCS Advisors is to
Yeah.
pick up for 2021, to pick up another minimum 30 individual investors to invest in different deals. That's our goal, is a minimum of 30 more clients, which is what we're looking forward to. The second thing we're looking forward to is we picked up actually another very large project in New England. I won't say where exactly yet, which should be a 2 to 3 year project, which we're really excited about. Um, I will announce it here on your podcast. The other big news,
Exclusive?
yes, I'll,
Exclusive?
I'll give you an exclusive depending when it airs, is that we are officially opening up our second, technically actually our third office in Portland, Maine, January 5th.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you, thank you. So
That's awesome.
yeah, we're doing a lot of business in New England, and it was just time to open up another satellite location up there.
That's where
So
you and I met. I think we met for the first time in Maine.
yes, we did at Nican, Portland.
Definitely.
That's
Yep.
correct.
In that sports
Sports
thing,
complex. Yep. Mhm.
the sports complex.
So and then the
Uh,
other thing is too is that we're really looking to diversify our investments. Like we're looking at some vaporizer companies. We're looking at some telemedicine platforms. There's some really good, unique opportunities to invest in Michigan, in Oklahoma right
this
now.
is huge. I don't want to gloss too much over this. This is huge. And again, like in terms of, we've touched upon it now a few times, but in terms of entrepreneurs listening to this, thinking about how they can apply themselves to this industry, you know, these businesses don't all touch the plant,
Correct.
right? So say that again. What I mean,
So
tech companies,
so so so
biohealth.
so so, so telemedicine.
Mhm.
So in telemedicine companies to vaporizer companies, a hardware actually. Um, Also, we are looking at grows and dispensaries actually in Michigan, Massachusetts, and also Oklahoma. To be very frank, we are steering clear of New Jersey, New York for all of 2021.
Wait till
So
it all kind of settles down and the process evens out a little bit.
time value of money. Would you rather sit here and make your money start working for you now with higher return on investment, or wait a year and a half to 2 years?
Right.
And overall, I mean, we're still shaking and baking here in 2020. We're excited for 2021.
Definitely.
For UCS Advisors, even though we get pigeonholed that we're just cannabis and hemp, in reality, about 65% of our business is cannabis and hemp. 35% is everything else, from sports energy drinks to tequila to we're actually working on an IMAX movie being narrated by Robert Redford.
Awesome.
Uh, so like we're really showing people, hey, there's more than just cannabis to get involved in when it comes to the private sector and different deals. And there's a lot of good opportunities out there. But yeah, we're really excited for 2021. And we're just really in general, 2020 is a great stepping stone year. And we come up with themes to our year every year.
Hmm.
And the 2021 theme for the year is invest in opportunities. We are surrounded by opportunities. You just have to decide whether or not you want to get your ass off the couch and actually do it.
That's
So,
exactly right.
because I'll tell you
Before,
right now, Will,
yep.
if for everyone listening who's an entrepreneur, you have until, in my opinion, till the third quarter of 2022 to get involved in this sector. If you do not, you can still get involved, but the return on investment is going to keep going down and down and down.
Sure,
So if
more.
you really
It's going
want
to
to get
become
in
more and more
now,
saturated,
yep,
and that those investment opportunities aren't. They're finite. There's only so
exactly,
many. Yeah.
exactly.
Before I let you go, I think one thing I'd love to hear from you, because I know this has been such a heat, and we touched upon it just briefly earlier, and I had a note to come back to it. But networking, networking pre 2020 was, normal. 2020 was not so normal. Um, Tell us about the importance of networking and how it's helped you kind of, we talked about the weed suit, and that for sure is a marketing, tool that you use to better network yourself and meet new people. um what was your weed suit of 2020?
Oh, so the weeds of 2020. Yeah, in general, for 2020, I for myself personally, I never realized how wide and diverse my network really was. How many contacts I had in multiple industries, which I'm very thankful for, both domestically and internationally.
Hmm.
The one thing I've seen a lot in 2020 is people who say they're good at networking have no clue how to network. If you haven't been networking for years, I'm talking about 5, 6, 7 years prior to 2020, more than likely you need some help and you should take a class. Um, there's actually a company called Network Wise with Adam Connors that actually offers a networking like 101 tutorial class, which we've referred numerous clients of ours to. So much so they actually gave us our own discount code to people that want it.
We'll
So
put it in the bio. You'll let me know. We'll put a
yeah, I'll
link
email it to
in the
you.
description
So
of this video.
it's a class I'd highly recommend. I've done it myself too. And to actually get a certification in networking and to have that certification on the bottom of every email, I'll tell you right now, it's a conversation starter.
Hmm.
Because I have a lot of people say, "Oh, what's this network-wise certification you have on the bottom of your email tag?" And I talk about it. And I tell people point blank, even if you are a professional networker, like for 10, 15, 20 years, the class is still just a good refresher on what to do and what not to do.
Sure.
So I'll probably say that was my green jacket for this year. And half the time it's just showing up.
Yep.
I tell people, even if you only attend a networking event for 20 or 30 minutes, just show up. Don't be on your phone, give eye contact, practice your 30 or 60-second elevator commercial ahead of time. One of the biggest bullshit excuses I hear is, "Oh, I guess I probably should have practiced my 60-second elevator pitch before I got on this Zoom networking call." Hello, McFly. Yes, of course you should have. Like, there's no excuse why you can't practice this ahead of time. Like, if you're gonna, because one thing about Zoom and just in general networking is it's all about the art of conversation. And if you can't if you can't hold a conversation, you don't know how to ask appropriate questions, people are going to see right through that. So I can't stress that enough about networking. People ask, what's the key to your success between 13 companies? It's networking, networking, networking. And
Totally.
then number two is having good business ethics, because as one of my buddies, Chris Vaglio, who has a Rocket Growth Agency, which is a personal branding company, he's been with me for all 13 of my companies. And about a year and a half ago, I asked him, like, Chris, I go, why do you always refer me business to all my companies? He's like, simple. Your business ethics are great. I don't care what business you're in, but you always have such great customer service and you have such great business ethics. It makes it very simple to refer you no matter what the business you're involved in. And
I
that really hit
totally
home.
agree with him. I totally agree with him. And also, not only, personally, I agree with him that you do adhere to that. Yes, very much so. But also that, and especially in the cannabis industry, I feel like it's not, customer service is not common. Like good customer service
Yep.
is not common, and business ethics or business acumen that maybe we've taken for granted as a result of a career prior to the cannabis industry. It's few and far between. It's for sure different now than it was 5-6 years ago when I first got into this industry. But it's a work in progress for sure. So being able to do things like, so the networking thing is part of an entrepreneurial kind of hurdle that I call, it's just stepping outside of your comfort zone, right?
Yep.
So and that's part of it, is going out and walking up to a stranger and saying, "Hey, I'm Will Reed, and this is what I do. Let me tell you about who I am." It's super uncomfortable the first few times, but it's the most basic tenet of running a business. Is you have to be able to have a conversation. You have to be able to do business appropriately and with ethics and with accountability and all of these things that I think are still very much in development in the cannabis industry. So
And here's another thing too, Will, about
yeah,
networking. And this is the one thing I tell people about in the cannabis industry that's not done enough. Part of networking is following up and delivering. And the amount of conversations that people have, but then they never follow up, you're losing out on opportunities. And that's part of networking, is to follow up. And people joke around because still to this day, I go to meetings, and you've seen this, Wolf, for the little black notebook and a pen. And people say all the time, like, wow, why do you still have a notebook? Because when we're talking, I want to write down notes of what I got to do to follow up.
yep,
And people say, wow, I can't believe you emailed me that introduction to that person you mentioned a week ago. I'm like, of course I did.
yep. I
So
have
part of
I have
networking is following up.
I have bags full of business cards from dozens of conferences, and they all, I don't have a notebook, but my technique is on the back of the business card. I write
Yep.
like,
Mhm.
wore a funny hat, or was
Oh,
eating
yeah.
a sandwich when he came to my booth, whatever silly little thing, was from New Jersey.
Part of it's all about the follow-up. And the one thing about the cannabis sector, which I cannot stress enough, is that we lack follow-up. And we lack following up and doing the deliverables. And we talk about being business professional, kind of like in the industry, is that's the one thing we're still hurting a lot with.
And picking up the phone and answering an email.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is, and I'll never forget doing a conference, doing a speaking engagement at a campus conference, where less than 10% of Americans actually have an active voicemail that you can actually leave a message. But when I asked people in the room, about 90% of people had an active voicemail, which is great. And then when I asked them how many people have an active LinkedIn account that they post at least once a week, well, in general, it's usually 7 out of every 10 Americans. Nope. In that cannabis room, it was 1 out of every 10 people.
Totally.
And it's like, guys, you're missing out on opportunities. You may not like doing these smaller things, but networking is so key in this industry. And the more and more business professionals that come to the industry, if you're not doing these other things, you're going to be left behind in the dust.
Totally. I tell my clients it's the voice, a company's voice is a combination of a couple things, and it's the physical voice, the picking up the phone, the conversations with the clients, and it's also the digital voice, and that's the messaging we put out on our social, the LinkedIn posts we do, the blogs we write, the knowledge share sort of stuff. But it's so important that you have to kind of figure out the delicate balance of what you need to do in order to grow your company, utilizing your physical and digital voice. But you have to use your voice. At the end of the day, you have to use your voice.
Exactly.
Dr. David, I appreciate your time very much. Tell the people we're getting to that. This is the plugs part of the show. Tell people where they can find you.
All right. So everyone, as I told everyone on LinkedIn, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Send me a connection request. Love to connect with you. The other thing is too, my website, UCSadvisor.com, brought to you by CannaPlanners. So they do a very good job. But the best thing is UCSadvisor.com, the website, LinkedIn, David Cunic, or you can just email me directly, which is david@UCSadvisor.com.
That has been David Cunic. He is the founder and CEO of UCS Advisor, a business leadership organization helping cannabis investors and entrepreneurs fulfill their goals. Dr. David, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been episode 4 of SENSimilla. We'll see you on the next one.